Greetings, Wasteland Armor here, back today for another fun video. Today we're going to be discussing and doing just a generally fairly in-depth review of the Swiss straight pull series rifles, particular for practical use and just situations such as SHTF. So the Swiss straight pull rifles often are erroneously known as the Schmidt-Rubin rifles. And this is not entirely true because Mr. Schmidt only actually designed one of these guns, which is this one here, the 1889. The following designs were all worked over by other designers, committees, just various things to help them make some improvements through the years. So what we're looking at right here is a pretty good sample of what you're typically going to encounter if you're looking at getting one of these guns. So on the bottom you have the original, the 1889. It's chambered in 7.5 by 53.5 Swiss GP90. Above it is a 1896/11 Schmidt, not Schmidt-Rubin, but this one's still pretty close. It was kind of a product improvement on the 1889. They're pretty easy to pick up because they have what looks like a crack on their stock, but that's actually where they spliced in a pistol grip. And above that is a K31. So these rifles are fairly common in the United States. At the time of this filming, you can still find them all, even sometimes they're imported. Royal Tiger at the time of this filming has some that just came in. But they're definitely not as cheap as they once were. These used to be a couple $100 a piece. Now you're looking at anywhere from almost $1,000 for a K31 to about $500 for a G9611 or the carbine version, the K11. And then the 1889 seemed to be the second most expensive after the K31s. But as far as practical use, which one's the best to get? Well, overall, I'd say they're all pretty good guns. The K31s are probably considered the most desirable. They're the most modern, of course, 1931s when it was adopted. And some of the things they did is they shortened the bolt and moved the locking lugs all the way up here to the front of the receiver. The 1889s, some people like because they have a 12-round magazine instead of 6. However, there is the issue of ammunition, and we'll get to that a little bit later. And then there's the G9611, G11, and K11s. They're all very good rifles. They're not quite as expensive, but they were strengthened over the 1889 by moving the bolt lugs to the middle of the bolt instead of at the very, very rear on the 1889. Which allows for higher pressure ammunition. So something just to know with ammunition with these guns, the best ammunition you can get is GP11 surplus. However, at the time of this filming, I have not been able to get any. It is extremely expensive. It used to be all over the place, and if you have some, that's awesome. I primarily use PPU, which hopefully will be able to remain in import, but also I know Seller and Baylot make some. So a particular note on those using the 1889, while the common belief is you cannot use the later 7.5 by 55, I have done it, and I have done it a lot. Now, I've used factory PPU loads, which is loaded a little bit lighter than GP11. However, these guns have survived GP11 test proof loads. The Swiss government did clear them to be used with GP11 in an emergency, but it can shorten the life of the rifle, so do so at your own risk. So as far as practicality, though, these all make pretty good hunting rifles, fun shooters, excellent target rifles. The Swiss target shooting is legendary. But would I use them in a SHTF situation? Well, honestly, this is one of the first surplus guns I've reviewed where I would say yes. Yes, I actually think they are a decent choice. In fact, in my opinion, they are probably the best manually operated fighting rifles you can get, period. So, what makes me think that? Well, for starters, durability. These guns are insanely durable and reliable. There's a lot of gun shop lore that these guns would be finicky in bad weather and muddy conditions. They never saw combat. They're very tightly machined, so of course they're not going to work that well, just like the Canadian Ross did. Well, while they haven't been in combat, so I can't say 100% that that's not a true statement, I have done some tests, and I'm going to show you these here in just a second. I did a test on the K31 in where I left it out in a trunk of a car in negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and then took it out that day. It was about 0 by the time I shot it, so it warmed up a little bit, but there were ice crystals formed on it, and I left it heavily greased. And I'll just let you see the results of that. A Swiss K31. Obviously it wasn't a combat anymore, but these were a neutral. And they were around at the same time. Known for having extremely tight tolerances, and this one's greased, so see how it works. Seems the K31 works. Now, as you can see, the results of that test, gun worked absolutely flawlessly, no issues. So, what about mud and grime and grit? Well, as much as it pained me to do it, I also did a mud test on this rifle. And the results might be surprising, and I'll let you watch that as well. This is going to be a lot more fun to watch than it is to make and dump mud on it. I don't expect this rifle to do well for a couple of reasons. It has a nice exposed slot for its op rod that operates it from the bolt. But what really worries me is when we work the action is this nice exposed cam on the rotating bolt. I think is going to get full of mud. So we're going to kind of follow the basic in-range step. I'm going to load 5 rounds into it. Fire 1 clean just to show it works. Put it on safe. Mud it up. Give it a good shake. And then we'll see what happens. So let's go ahead and try it. Five rounds. Just to prove it works. I'd say it works. Safety on. Now we have some nice, lush, beautiful Montana mud. Oh, this hurts. Just pour it right on there. Nice and packed in. So, that's a lot of mud. Kind of gritty mud too, but we're going to go ahead and give it a good shake. Oh yeah, look at that. Nice and muddy all over in there. See if it'll run. That seems to be working a little too well. More mud. Pack it in there nice and dirty. Very nice and dirty there. As you can see, it is full of mud. Germans. Oh, failure to go in the battery. We have a failure. I suspect there's mud in the locking lugs. There's mud on that round. So let's see if we can remedy this. That gun is full of mud. Magazine's full. It's in battery. I would call that a remarkable success. Had a little hiccup there, but as you can see, that action is full of dirt. As you can see from that test, that rifle completely ate the mud. It had one little hiccup, but just hitting the bolt harder made it go home into battery, and it worked. I was a little surprised because there's a cutout on the bolt, actually, that I thought would let muck and grime in, but it actually didn't seem to. And my theory on that is probably the gun's tolerances are so tight, I think that it actually just wiped the mud away as it closed. The mud was actually pretty sandy too, so it was nasty stuff. Well, what about the older designs? How do they do? Because they are a little different. I could not bring myself to pour mud on this 1889. It is in absolutely beautiful condition. But I did pour some on this 9611, which is also a very nice gun, but decided to do it for science because I have not been able to find anyone else who's done it. So I'll let you watch that test. So on the G9611, all the rotating parts are shrouded back in the steel section here. So that should, in theory, make it more impervious to mud, with only this sliding back and forth. My biggest concern is going to be mud getting in the breech face, and possibly making it not go into battery, or mud getting in the magazine and jamming the rifle. 6 rounds, 7.5 Swiss. Alright. Fire in the hole. Gun works. Safety on. Oh, this is painful. This is a beautiful numbers matching rifle, I should add. For science. Nice and muddy. So we'll give it the standard old shake. See if it'll work. And we had a failure already. Possibly it's a dud round. Let's try that again. No bang on. Okay, try cycling around out. Try that again. Might have been a dud round. I'd say it's working pretty good. Remarkably well. In fact, it doesn't even feel muddy. So we're going to put more mud on it. Because this klutzy World War I soldier decided to drop his gun in the mud again. And there we go. Just look how filthy that is.
Oh, failure to go into battery. It's in battery. Gun fires. Overall, I'd say pretty dang well. I think the one round that didn't go off was a dud. There's some crappy hand loads I was given. But these guns do remarkably well, even just absolutely filthy, covered in muck and mud. So you can see the action does actually a pretty good job of sealing mud out of the actual mechanism. Mechanism's not that dirty at all.
So as you can see from that test, it also worked pretty dang well. There was one misfire that was actually due to the ammunition, but overall it really didn't have any issues either. And yes, as you can see, the test totally ruined the guns. They're unusable, but I use them anyways. It did take about, in all seriousness, about 4 hours to clean each one a piece. So that was not the most fun video to make, but it was interesting to me. But these guns, InRange has tested some other bolt actions, and they actually seem to have outperformed the Lee Enfield and the Mauser. So I would say overall, very reliable weapons. I would imagine similar performance from the 1889, but I haven't tested it. So how about just how do they do shooting? So first I want to show you, particularly on the 1889s, a little accuracy test in shooting the 7.5 PPU ammo just to show you that it can be done. The 1889s have the cool bit about their antiques, so some people might want to get these just because you don't have to go through the FFL and all the red tape. So they might actually have some SHTF application as far as prepping goes. So I'll show you just a clip of where we test accuracy and then just fire a magazine of them. We're going to be doing a little accuracy testing with an 1889 Schmidt-Rubin. This is the rear locking version, chambered in 7.5 by 53.5 GP90. Now, today we're not shooting that. We're shooting PPU 7.5 Swiss factory ammo. People say don't do it. From the research I was able to do, this is a little bit lighter than GP90. The Swiss did say you could run GP90 in an emergency. I'm not sure if I would really feel comfortable with GP90. This is about 110% the pressure of a GP90-23, the last iteration of what this was designed for. These did survive a proof test in England that they fired 2 GP11 proof rounds through them. So that would have been about 200% of what they're designed for. This gun's had no pressure signs, so I think it'll be okay. The accuracy is a little weird though, so we're going to go ahead and try it out at 100 yards and see how it does. All right, let's go check that out. So as you can see, this thing's shooting fairly wide group for a Schmidt-Rubin and a bit high. So probably some bolt flex going on in there. Not letting it quite be as accurate, and 1889s have a crazy long throat. But now we're going to try something else. So now we're going to try combat accuracy. I've got it loaded with 12 rounds of the same kind of ammo. Could you defend yourself with this stuff? I'm going to go prone and try the whole mag against it. Well, the gun survived that. Let's go see if the target was as lucky. Alrighty, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 12 rounds fired hit. I know that I pulled one off to the right pretty bad. We may have had a flyer. I don't know where the other one went, but still not bad. I would definitely say you could defend yourself with that. I was shooting pretty quickly, but overall, I would say not bad. It's definitely useful still. Gun's old as Montana, so pretty good for what's federally not even considered a firearm. And as you can see from that test, the gun did not explode. Accuracy on the 1889s is not as good as the later models, but it seemed acceptable. As far as the other two designs, they are both pretty dang accurate. There's some debate to this day as to which is more accurate. I find that I shoot better with the 9611 over the K31. Part of the reason being, if you look at the rear sights, the sight is farther up on this one, where the K31's is farther back, and that was done to lengthen the sight radius, which is a good thing. However, I am farsighted, and it means that the rear sight is extremely fuzzy. And whereas the G9611 is quite clear, and being the long rifle has a really long sight radius, so I shoot it better. But they're both phenomenally accurate. I have taken a deer with the K31, and I'll tell you that the 7.5 Swiss cartridge is absolutely devastating. My father also has a K11, which I don't have here to show you, but really it's pretty much same length as a K31, just uses the 96 style action. So the barrel's a little shorter, it kicks harder, it's louder, but it's lighter. But not a whole lot different in operation otherwise. As far as personal use, I like the 9611. I'm going to show you a run and gun comparison where I run the 9611, and you can just see how smooth this gun is. I actually found I was able to keep up even with semi-autos compared to other runs. And I'll show it in comparison to the 1889 just to also show you that one in action. And then I'll point out a few things I noticed.
Command.
Go!
On your command.
Go!
So from those runs, what I learned was a couple of the weaknesses of the 1889. That straight wrist was definitely harder to use at speed. It just was hard to keep the gun in your shoulder, and there's a little more fidgeting. Also, the loading is just a little harder with that 12 round magazine compared to the 6. And then the 1889 has an older style sight that's just not quite as good. However, I'd feel pretty comfortable really using either gun in a serious application. The 9611, I really appreciated that they added the pistol grip though. So, for SHTF then, what are your options with these guns? How do they feel? Well, for speed, they're still a manually operated rifle, so it's a disadvantage to a semi-auto. However, I would say that the straight pull action in a lot of ways is almost comparable to a lever action. The nice thing is that while in a raw mad minute, Lee Enfields can actually still outrun these guns, but in practical speed shooting where you're moving and shooting, I find the straight pull takes a lot less thought to operate. It's just very natural. Some people who are really used to turn bolts do find it a little difficult to get used to, though. That's a matter of training. The 6 round packet clips that you can load these with are super smooth, as you could probably see from the run-and gun. I had a little trouble with the 1889, but that was because the clip got stuck in my pouch. I'd overfilled the pouch. You can, of course, single load these as well, so if you don't have the clips, that's still doable. Swapping magazines with the detachable magazines really isn't practical on these. I wouldn't recommend on planning on doing that. The clips are lighter as well and just, I think, are a better option. One cool thing and one reason why I like the 9611 pattern the best, and the K11 and G11 would be the same way, is there's a stripper clip guide on the receiver, which the 1889 does not have. The K31 has it, however, what I do with it doesn't work on the K31, and you can use 5 round Mosin clips as stripper clips for this gun. And while that doesn't load the magazine fully, Mosin clips are a pretty common thing to come across and are easy to keep around, especially if you have a Mosin. And actually, ironically, it's smoother than using it with a Mosin. So that is definitely something to keep in mind if you're trying to decide between the three which one you want. As far as options, as a fighting rifle, how would they do? So obviously they're iron sighted. They have superb iron sights, particularly the later models. Some people obviously can't shoot iron sights well. There are a lot of optics options out there for them. There's scout scopes, there's clamp-on mounts. Trying to drill and tap the receiver isn't usually a good idea on these because they eject straight up. But there are definitely some good mounting options for optics. There's also the Swiss diopter sights, which are nice peeps target setup, which would also probably work pretty dang well. Might improve accuracy, but not quite as rugged as those battle sights. One thing to know on the 9611 and just that pattern of rifle, they tend to shoot a little high. You can get taller front sights for them though. So in comparison to a semi-auto, honestly, once you hit about 100 yards, I don't think, at least for that first 6 shots, you're going to notice a whole lot of difference. Once you get past that 6, you got to start reloading, obviously. And when you get in under 50 yards, you're really going to notice the speed difference, but they are very quick. Please do note I've never been in combat or anything like that. The most dangerous thing I've had to do with a gun was fire a warning shot at a moose that charged me, but I've never been in a gunfight, so what do I know on that? But I would feel pretty comfortable with how durable and just remarkably effective these rifles are. Now, one thing that might be a disadvantage in an SHTF situation is 7.5 Swiss is, well, not tremendously hard to come by. It is quite rare, or comparative to some of the more common calibers. It does take a standard .308 caliber projectile, so if you reload, it's pretty easy. Also, if you reload and you have the older gun, it's nice because you can download the ammo a bit. But still, 7.5 Swiss ammunition might cause some issues there. It's not as bad as something, say, 6.5 Kirkano, but still could be a problem. Now, there is potentially a solution if you really want to use one of these guns as your primary weapon. These are not particularly common, but what does exist are these. A small number of these were imported, my understanding, by Golden State Arms years ago. And it's a sporterized rifle. But this is a G9611 chambered in .308 Winchester. It is very accurate. I find not quite as smooth as the 7.5s, but I think it might be because it's a non-numbers matching gun. And these were pretty intricately machined. And then being a sporter, I've noticed it tends to have a little bit of a opening up in group once it gets hot, probably because they're pretty intricately bedded rifles. But there are some caliber options out there. They're not real common, but that is an option for a more common ammunition type. Also, some 1889s were converted to 30-30. I've never come across one, but I know they exist. So maybe in conclusion then, how are these guns compared to other surplus rifles for SHTF? Well, they're probably still going to be lagging behind a proper battle rifle, semi-automatic, especially in magazine capacity. However, compared to other manually operated guns, what I've found is they are faster, more durable, more reliable, and just easier to use than almost any other surplus rifle. They're certainly better built than probably 90% of the commercial guns out there. The cartridge is powerful and definitely effective, although a little bit rare. I find they're easier to use than turnboats overall. The barrels, I've heard, are actually hardened on the inside, so they have tremendous barrel life, which is also a perk. So overall, I'd say maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give these a solid 8 as an SHTF rifle. The biggest disadvantage, of course, being the ammunition. Just the scarcity of it. But overall, great rifles. Also just amazing hunting rifles and just for having fun. Thanks for watching. This is Wasteland Armor out.